Hello, everyone. This is Jim Santucci, Executive Director with CARA. And today I have the honor of Allison Gilbert. And Allison is an Emmy Award-winning journalist and author. She currently serves on the board of the directors of the National Alliance for Grieving Children. And Allison also serves on the board of the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. Most recently, she was asked to serve on the Global COVID-19 Relief Coalition. She's an author including Past and Present, Keeping Memories of Loved Ones Alive. Allison is also the official narrator of the National September 11th Memorial and Museum's core historical exhibition and audio tour. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you so much for having me.
And this afternoon, we're just going to ask a few questions for Allison. As many of you will be watching this as a part of our virtual fundraiser for 2020. And Allison was scheduled to come to Palo Alto, California as part of our in-person fundraiser. But as fate would have it, due to COVID-19, we had to postpone. She'll be joining us next year, next spring, to see everyone in person. But she's said she'd like to share a few things with us in a mini interview as part of our virtual fundraiser, which launches on May 2nd and runs through May 9th. So Allison, I have a few questions for you.
Okay, I'm ready.
Great. So Allison, you come from a journalism. What prompted you to dive so deeply into grief and loss?
My career in journalism started and ended in New York City. I graduated college and I really just dug in. I loved being in newsrooms. I found it to be absolutely intoxicating. I thought it was tremendous. I loved going beyond the police tape. I loved seeing things that other people couldn't see. I loved being able to pull back the curtain and really explore Manhattan in ways that most people couldn't. And then my mother got diagnosed with cancer. And then my father got diagnosed with cancer. And with 5 years of each other, they both passed away. Add into that 9/11, which I was way too close to the falling debris that day and was in the hospital reporting from my gurney, basically. One thing just really fell into the other, and I knew that I wanted to take all of my passion for writing and researching and interviewing and use those skills to a topic that was becoming very important to me, which was grief and loss and resilience, ultimately.
Fantastic. Obviously, we at CARA do the work of supporting those in grief, and I definitely want to offer my condolences for the loss of your mom and your dad as that time has passed. You know, time helps to heal. There's memories that last forever. I love your perspective of how he's actively remembered. So I just was fortunate to be on a webinar with Allison where she was talking about actively remembering, and I definitely want to encourage everyone to read her books and learn how to do that. So second question I have, Allison, is, as you mentioned 9/11, you played an important role as a journalist in the 9/11 disaster and tragedy. And now you're serving on the COVID-19 National Coalition to help people manage the impact of the virus, ways to grieve and ways to honor and remember loved ones. Can you compare these two disasters and the way they inform your understanding of resilience and the journey through grief?
I think it's a really great question. I was just talking today about the dramatic similarities and also the dissimilarities between 9/11 as something that impacted so many Americans in so many ways, and of course the international community as well, and what we're going through now with the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think the one part, I mean, there's many, but the one part that I really wanted to focus on now is that there's never been as big in our collective memory a time where more people are coping with loss, where death is, out of the closet, it's here, it's striking, it's in our face. I think for a while, 9/11 was mostly acutely felt in New York City. I think that for New Yorkers, it was a story that everyone should appreciate bigger and more, and don't you get it? And I think if you were out of New York at that time, yes, you felt it, but you can also pivot and then go on with your day. Something was different in New York that just kept 9/11, for obvious reasons, much more in our face, coping with loss on a visual basis, when you're in your own community and you see the ripple effects continue to unfold, and even in the rebirth of downtown New York City. I think the similarity with COVID and where it's kind of taking that 9/11 experience, that collective experience, and it's amplified, because now the geography is clearly much bigger. No one has to really underscore that point. And because grief is being felt universally, I think there is going to be an opportunity for us to re-engage, to realign our conversations, to support people in a bigger way, to have conversations in a much more deliberate fashion, and to not feel so uncomfortable bringing up topics that we fear others don't want to talk about. I think we have this wonderful, oddly wonderful, no one wants this opportunity, but it's here, this wonderful opportunity to use this awful experience to heighten awareness and compassion. And I think that's something that I know you guys are doing for sure. And I applaud you for doing that.
That's really interesting how you framed it. I recently was talking to a widow who was talking about, since her husband had passed, she's had what she's deemed tragic opportunities. She's had opportunities that have come about. If he hadn't passed, she probably wouldn't have been offered these opportunities. And so she looks at him as tragic opportunities, frame things. And I do believe, I agree with you, life in society is going to be different after this. I think if we can take it in and allow it, and we've talked about it already here at CARA, we expect to have our service request increase from this a lot of different ways. And so we're trying to think of ways now to be able to be prepared for that as we get on the other end of this, which is really another tragedy for the globe. But I think what can we learn from it is huge. So thank you. You know, and your particular book, Past and Present, I think you spend an entire chapter around technology. What is the most important takeaway from that section? And is it essential for you to spend so many pages specifically talking about tech? And I think that resonates well. We're in Silicon Valley here in Palo Alto, so I would love your thoughts on that.
Well, listen, I'm a creature of Zoom calls. I'm a creature of my phone and looking at Facebook and Instagram, and my kids are teenagers and they're well, schooled in Instagram and Snapchat. Listen, this is where we are. And I think that the opportunity to share memories of our loved ones, to keep those celebrations of what they still mean to us in the present tense, it's easier when you do it where you already are. If you don't make it an extra hurdle to remember and honor and talk about your loved one, to share stories, to post pictures, if you're not making it harder, you can make it easier. And the easier way to share for many of us these days is clearly with technology. And my parents died before there was social media. And so for me, being able to post a picture of my mom and dad, it is just the most fascinating, uplifting experience, because I am now bringing them into the present day in a way that feels authentic. It also allows me to share stories and pictures of my parents, but in a way that's not preachy to my children, because they can then just see it in their feed whenever they happen across it. I'm not talking directly to them about what they have to remember about their grandparents, but they can absorb it for themselves in their own way, in their own time. And I feel like technology, if we can really use it and make it a part of our lives for our work, then it's equally important to make it a part of our lives for the work of remembering and honoring our loved ones and keeping them with us.
That's really right on. I agree with that 100%. My dad passed away a couple of years ago, and I'll put a picture of him up there. I have people, my aunts and uncles, who say, "Wow, Jim, you look exactly like your dad did." And I mean,
And it feels good, right?
it feels really good to honor my dad in that way and to know that I'm continuing that lineage. So I do think, um, I think even what we're learning at Cara with the COVID-19 and using Zoom support to support our clients, we're breaking a lot of the assumptions we had before that maybe this wouldn't work. And we're realizing that another way for us to support folks, especially when there's distance. So I'm glad that you did spend that entire chapter about that, and people can grab onto that idea. Um, would you love to share with us about your next project? Are you working on a project right now?
I am. I feel like I'm always working on a new project. I think tech-wise and, in terms of my work in this area, I am starting to do webinars. You were on my first one today. This is new terrain to me, but I'm finding it fun and engaging, and I would invite people to keep checking back on my social media to find out when the next one is. It was fun. I had a good time today. I think hopefully, what do you think, Jim? Gave out some good information?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Kathy, our development manager, also was on the call, the webinar. It was great. It was a great way to learn. And I have to say, as you bring this wonderful energy right now, that's the way those webinars are, even though we're looking at slide, and I really appreciate that. So are we continuing to keep track of what you're doing over the next 6 months
and I can't wait. I can't wait to do it online and then see the Cara community in person. That'll be amazing next year. I cannot wait to come out to California. I'm in New York, and I'm very much looking forward to it.
That's fantastic. Another question as we wrap up here, looking back on what you've learned after so many years writing about grief and loss, can you share one key lesson for everyone listening? What they should take away from what you learned? I know that's a high bar, asking for one, but anything you'd like to share?
I actually think it is a fantastic question, and it's actually one that took me a long time to learn. So it's actually an easy question for me to answer because I've come to it, and it's been the greatest realization of my post-parent loss life. So I'm really happy to share it with you. I think that what's given me and many of my readers the most hope and the most healing is really engaging in a mind shift. And what I mean by this is the following. When loss first happens, if we're lucky, many people show up to give us support. They know what to do. A death happens, they know to visit in normal times, and it's not just a Zoom funeral or a Zoom Shiva. They know how to show up. They may bring you food, they send you an email, they write you a note. People generally know how to be there when loss first occurs. The byproduct of that is that as a griever, you are then passive. You're passively accepting support. And that's fabulous in that window of time where grief is it just cracks you open. The shift that happens later, and I think that what brings the most hope and the most healing is to switch from passive mourning to active remembering. Because the work of keeping the memory of your loved one alive cannot be up to the other people who showed up to support you in your grief. The act of remembering is up to you and what you do with your memories to keep that recollection, that recipe, that sound, that music, all of those touch points, all of those senses that we can access to keep these memories close, that involves active remembering, which is distinct from being passive. So that is the one takeaway that really has informed my book, Past and Present, keeping memories of loved ones alive, right? It's keeping, it's present, it's active, it's a verb. We must do these things. And that brings us incredible joy and helps us stay connected to the loved ones who we miss most.
Thank you. That's fantastic. And that resonates with me. And I know all the folks that support Cara and all the volunteers that we have doing the work. And that's the thing that we do every day. And I think your reframing of that is really helpful, because I think people they're not sure what to do after that passive. And I think it empowers every person who is grieving to be able to, they're in charge of their own memory for that person. And I love that approach. And so thank you. Last question, closing question, I guess, is more of a comment. Is there any last comments or thoughts you'd love to leave with those that are listening today and that are thinking of supporting Cara and are part of our fundraiser?
Well, of course you must. This work is so critical. If not for you, who? Where would we go if you weren't raising your hand and opening your heart to provide support? We have never needed you and your team more than what the world is needing now. We have never experienced grief on such scale. For every one person who has died, as you know, there are so many tentacles of people who that person touched. So whether or not it's immediate family or extended family, neighbors and coworkers, we are all reeling. And I would imagine by the end of this pandemic, I was going to say epidemic, at the end of this pandemic, there won't be a person, I don't imagine, who will not be touched by grief. So there has never been a more critical time to support you, Jim, and all that you and your colleagues do. And I can't wait to continue partnering with you and working with you and coming out to California next year. It can't be soon enough for me.
Thank you so much for those kind words. And thank you, Allison, for the great work you're doing. Continue to have that impact that you're having. And we look forward to seeing you here. And in the meantime, we wish you and your family well, stay healthy. And again, thank you so much for this time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jim.